The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Clara Montgomery stumbled through the sage-dotted wasteland, her silk wedding dress torn and dusty. 3 days had passed since she fled her father's ranch. 3 days since she'd refused to marry Augustus Crane, the cattle baron who'd purchased her like livestock, with a dowry agreement signed in whiskey and greed. Her lips cracked and bleeding, she clutched the emerald ring her mother had given her before dying. It was all she had left. The trading post appeared like a mirage through the heat waves. Clara's vision blurred as she pushed through the wooden door, nearly collapsing against the counter. The bearded trader looked up from his ledger, eyes narrowing at her bedraggled appearance. "Water," she croaked. "Please, I can pay." She held up the ring with trembling fingers, the emerald catching the light filtering through the dusty windows. Before I continue this tale of survival and unexpected love in the unforgiving West, I'd love to ask you to take just a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly motivates us to bring you more quality stories of courage, romance, and adventure. And I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments. The trader reached for the ring, but a strong hand intercepted, fingers closing gently around Clara's wrist. She gasped and turned to face a man unlike any she'd ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his copper skin gleaming with a thin sheen of sweat, long black hair tied back with a strip of leather. He wore both the clothing of his Apache heritage and the practical dress of someone who moved between worlds. Buckskin pants, a cotton shirt open at the collar, and a knife sheathed at his belt. But it was his eyes that held her, dark as midnight, fierce, yet somehow gentle. "Keep your ring," he said, his voice like rolling thunder across the plains. He spoke to the trader without releasing her wrist. "Give her water. Put it on my account." "Dakota." The trader nodded, immediately filling a canteen. Clara wanted to protest, to maintain her pride, but her body betrayed her. She drank deeply, water spilling down her chin. When she finally lowered the canteen, she found Dakota still watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "Thank you," she managed. "I'll repay you when—" "You're running," he interrupted. It wasn't a question. His gaze took in her ruined dress, her bare feet cut and bleeding, the terror still lingering in her green eyes. "From a husband?" "From becoming one," she corrected, lifting her chin despite her exhaustion. "I won't be sold like a broodmare." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "My camp is a half-day's ride north. You need food, rest, and those feet wrapped before infection sets in. You can work to earn your keep. I need someone who can cook and mend. My hands are better with horses than needles." Clara's first instinct was to refuse. She knew what people said about Apache warriors, about captives taken and lives destroyed. But as she looked into Dakota's eyes, she saw no threat, only an offer freely given, one she could refuse without consequence. "Why would you help me?" she asked, genuinely confused. "Because 3 winters ago, I watched soldiers burn my village. My wife," he paused, jaw tightening. "She died in the flames while I was hunting. I know what it means to run with nowhere to go. I know what it means to be alone when you need help most." The rawness in his voice made Clara's chest constrict. Here was a man who understood loss, who knew the weight of survival. She thought of her alternatives: the desert, starvation, or Augustus Crane's brutal hands. "I accept," she said quietly. "But I work for my keep. I won't be indebted or obligated beyond fair labor." "Agreed." Dakota released her wrist, and Clara immediately felt the absence of his warmth. He turned to the trader. "James, sell me canvas for a shelter, salt pork and cornmeal, and boots that might fit her." As they rode north on Dakota's paint horse, Clara, seated before him, held steady by his arm around her waist. She tried to ignore the heat radiating from his chest against her back. The desert landscape rolled past in shades of rust and gold, the late afternoon sun painting everything in amber light. "What's your name?" Dakota asked, his breath stirring the loose strands of hair at her temple. "Clara. Clara Montgomery." "Clara," he repeated, and the way he said it, soft and deliberate, as if tasting each syllable, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "It means bright or clear in the white man's tongue." "Does it?" She'd never known. "What does your name mean?" "Friend to all." A pause. "Some would say I haven't lived up to it since I started living between worlds. Not fully Apache anymore, not fully accepted by the white settlements either." Clara heard the loneliness in those words. The isolation. "I understand something of being caught between worlds. My mother was Irish, spoke Gaelic when she thought no one listened. My father tried to beat it out of her, to make her a proper American wife. She never stopped singing her old songs, though. Even at the end." Dakota's arm tightened slightly around her waist, a gesture of comfort. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythm of the horse's gait lulling Clara into an almost dreamlike state. She should have been afraid. She was in many ways, but something about this man's steady presence made her feel safer than she had in years. "We're here," Dakota announced as they crested a rise. Below them spread a small valley with a creek running through it, cottonwoods providing blessed shade. A sturdy cabin stood near the water, with corrals holding a dozen horses. It was modest but well-maintained, a testament to hard work and careful planning. As Dakota helped Clara down from the horse, his hands spanning her waist, she noticed the scars on his forearms, raised marks that told stories of battles and survival. When he caught her looking, he didn't hide them. "Every mark tells me I survived when I could have died," he said simply. "They remind me to keep living." That night, after Clara had eaten her first real meal in days, rabbit stew with wild onions and herbs she couldn't name, she sat by the fire while Dakota tended to her wounded feet with surprising gentleness. His large, calloused hands worked carefully, cleaning each cut before applying a salve that smelled of sage and honey. "This will hurt," he warned, before wrapping the bandages. "Go slow," Clara whispered, tensing. "It hurts." Dakota's dark eyes met hers, something fierce and protective flashing in their depths. "I'll die before I hurt you," he said, with such conviction that Clara's breath caught. "You have my word, not as a man to a woman he employs, but as a warrior to someone under his protection. No harm will come to you in my camp." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, not from pain, but from the unfamiliar sensation of being valued, of being seen as a person rather than property. "Why?" she asked again, because she needed to understand. "Why do you care?" Dakota finished tying the bandage before answering. He sat back on his heels, firelight playing across his strong features, illuminating the sharp planes of his face and the sorrow etched around his eyes. "Because I see a woman worth saving," he said quietly. "Not because you're helpless. You survived 3 days in the desert alone. That takes strength most men don't have. But because everyone deserves someone in their corner when the world becomes too much to bear alone." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd expected many things from this arrangement: cold civility at best, predatory danger at worst. She hadn't expected kindness. She hadn't expected to feel this strange pull toward a man who was, by all accounts, a stranger. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning it with every fiber of her being. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Clara rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, cornbread and bacon, coffee strong enough to strip paint. She mended Dakota's shirts, noting how his shoulders strained the seams, how the fabric pulled across his chest. She learned to make pemmican from dried meat and berries, to recognize which plants were edible and which poisonous. In return, Dakota taught her to ride, to shoot, to track game through the sparse vegetation. "A woman alone needs to protect herself," he explained one afternoon, positioning her hands correctly on the rifle. He stood behind her, arms bracketing hers, his chest pressed against her back. "Feel the weight. Breathe steady. Squeeze. Don't pull." Clara tried to focus on the target, a tin can balanced on a fence post. But all she could feel was the solid heat of him. The way his breath stirred her hair, the timbre of his voice when he spoke low like this. "The sound of your voice gives me chills," she whispered without thinking, then froze, mortified by her admission. Dakota went still behind her. For a moment, neither breathed. Then his lips brushed the shell of her ear. Barely a touch, and he murmured, "Then I'll speak into your ear." The rifle discharged, with a crack that made them both jump. The bullet went wide, nowhere near the target. Clara turned in the circle of his arms, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the gunshot. Dakota's eyes had darkened, his jaw tight with restraint. The air between them crackled with a tension neither could name. "I should," Clara started, but didn't finish. Should what? Step away? Maintain distance? Remember that this was an arrangement of convenience, that she was working off a debt, that getting involved with another man, even one who made her feel alive in ways she'd never experienced, would be foolish beyond measure. "You should," Dakota agreed roughly, but neither of them moved. His hands remained on her waist, thumbs brushing the fabric of her borrowed shirt. "Clara, I promised you safety. That includes from me." "I won't." "I know," she interrupted, and she did know. Whatever this was building between them, Dakota would never force her, never take advantage. That certainty made her braver than she should have been. "What if I don't want to be safe from you?" Dakota's control visibly frayed. His fingers tightened on her waist, and for a moment, Clara thought he might kiss her, might close that final distance. But instead, he stepped back, putting space between them. "You don't know what you're saying," he said, his voice strained. "You're grateful. That's not the same as—" "Don't tell me what I feel," Clara said sharply, surprising herself with her vehemence. "I've had men tell me what to think, what to feel, what to do my entire life. You're the first man who's ever asked what I wanted. So don't start deciding for me now." Something like pain crossed Dakota's face. "I swore I wouldn't love again. When I lost Ayana, when I pulled her body from the ashes." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I promised I'd honor her memory by staying alone, that I'd never replace her." Clara's anger softened into understanding. "I'm not asking you to replace her. I would never presume." She took a breath. "My mother used to say that the heart has infinite rooms. Loving someone new doesn't evict the ones who came before. They remain, part of who we are, shaping how we love again." Dakota looked at her, as if seeing her truly for the first time. Not as a woman he'd rescued, not as someone passing through, but as someone who might stay. The thought terrified and thrilled Clara in equal measure. "I need time," he said finally. To think, to be certain I'm not dishonoring her. Take all the time you need, Clara replied, even though part of her wanted to close the distance again, to feel his arms around her, to hear his voice murmuring in her ear, I'm not going anywhere. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. It was a hot afternoon 2 weeks later when the dust cloud appeared on the horizon. Clara was hanging laundry when she spotted it, and something cold settled in her stomach. She ran to find Dakota in the stable where he was treating a horse's injured leg. "Riders," she gasped. "Coming fast!" Dakota was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. His expression darkened as he counted the approaching horses. 8 men, well armed. He turned to Clara. "Is there anyone who might come looking for you?" Clara's blood turned to ice. Augustus Crane. He'd consider my refusal an insult, an attack on his pride. Then we prepare. Dakota's voice shifted into something harder, more dangerous. The warrior, rather than the gentle teacher. "Can you shoot?" "Not well, but I can try." "That'll have to do." He moved with swift efficiency, gathering rifles, checking ammunition. "There's a root cellar beneath the kitchen. If things go bad, you go there and don't come out until—" "I'm not hiding while you face 8 men alone," Clara interrupted fiercely. "We face this together." Dakota's eyes searched hers, finding a determination that matched his own. "Together," he agreed, and something in that single word felt like a promise, a commitment that went beyond this immediate danger. The riders came to a stop in a semicircle before the cabin, horses stamping and snorting. Augustus Crane sat his gray stallion, with the confidence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. He was handsome in a cold, cruel way. Blonde hair slicked back, eyes the color of winter ice, mouth set in a thin line of displeasure. His men flanked him, hands resting casually near their weapons. "Clara Montgomery," Augustus called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "I've come to retrieve my wayward bride. Your father sends his regards and his insistence that you honor your family's agreement." Clara stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely but ready. Dakota moved to stand beside her, his presence a solid wall of support. "I'm no one's bride," Clara called back, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I made no agreement. My father sold me, but I don't recognize the transaction." Augustus's cold eyes shifted to Dakota, and his lip curled with disdain. "I see you've been keeping company with savages. How fitting. Tell me, does he know what you're worth? The price your father negotiated." "She's not property," Dakota said, his voice deadly quiet. "And you're not welcome here. Turn around and ride back the way you came." "Or what?" Augustus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You'll face 8 armed men, you and a woman who can barely hold a rifle?" He leaned forward in his saddle. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand Clara over, and I'll let you live. Otherwise, we'll burn this place to the ground, with both of you in it. Your choice, savage." Clara felt Dakota tense beside her, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. She knew he was calculating odds, considering options. 8 against 2 were poor numbers by any measure. "There's another option," she said suddenly, an idea crystallizing with desperate clarity. "Single combat, you against Dakota. Winner takes all." "Clara, no," Dakota said sharply. But Augustus was already smiling, a predator scenting easy prey. "Single combat? How delightfully primitive. Very well, but when I win, and I will win, you'll marry me tonight and your Apache friend will watch before we leave him bleeding in the dirt." "And if I win," Dakota said, his voice like gravel, "you and your men ride away and never come near Clara again. You tell her father the deal is void. She's under my protection now. Agreed. Augustus dismounted, drawing a wicked-looking knife from his belt. Blades more personal that way. Dakota handed his rifle to Clara, his eyes holding hers for a long moment. Whatever happens, you don't come out until it's over. Promise me. Dakota, promise me, Clara. I promise, she whispered, even though every instinct screamed at her to do otherwise. The two men circled each other in the yard, dust rising around their boots. Augustus moved with practiced grace, clearly trained in knife fighting. But Dakota moved like water, like wind, each step deliberate and economical. Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Augustus struck first, a quick slash aimed at Dakota's ribs. Dakota twisted away, the blade missing by inches. He countered with a strike of his own, drawing first blood. A shallow cut across Augustus's cheek that made the cattle baron snarl with rage. "You'll pay for that, savage," Augustus hissed. The fight intensified, becoming a deadly dance of thrust and parry, slash and dodge. Both men bore the marks of combat, cuts on arms, a slice across Dakota's shoulder that bled freely, a deeper wound on Augustus's thigh that made him favor his left leg. Clara gripped the rifle so tightly her knuckles went white, every fiber of her being focused on the man fighting for her freedom. Augustus feinted left, then drove forward with surprising speed, his blade aimed at Dakota's heart. Dakota blocked, but the force of Augustus's charge drove both men to the ground. They rolled in the dust, grappling for dominance, knives forgotten in favor of raw strength. Augustus landed a solid punch to Dakota's jaw that snapped his head back. Dakota responded with an elbow to Augustus's temple that left the cattle baron dazed. But Augustus was desperate and vicious. As Dakota rose to his feet, Augustus grabbed a handful of dust and threw it in his eyes. Dakota stumbled back, momentarily blinded, and Augustus seized his knife from the dirt. "No!" Clara screamed, raising the rifle. Everything happened in heartbeats. Augustus lunged forward, knife raised for a killing strike. Dakota, still half blind, tried to dodge but wasn't fast enough. The blade descended toward his chest, and Clara fired. The bullet caught Augustus in the shoulder, spinning him around. His knife flew from his hand, landing in the dirt several feet away. He fell to his knees, clutching the wound, blood seeping between his fingers. Clara worked the rifle's action, chambering another round. The weapon now pointed steadily at Augustus's head. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice, when she spoke, was ice and iron. "You'll leave now," she said, "all of you. And if any of you ever come near this ranch again, if you ever threaten Dakota or me or anyone under our protection, the next bullet goes between your eyes. Do I make myself clear?" Augustus stared at her with a mixture of shock and rage. "You shot me! You actually—" "And I'll do it again," Clara interrupted. "Mount up, now." Two of Augustus's men dismounted to help their boss onto his horse. Augustus swayed in the saddle, his face pale from blood loss and humiliation. "Your father will hear of this," he spat. "You'll be disowned, penniless." "Good," Clara said. "I never wanted his blood money anyway." As the riders disappeared into the distance, Clara finally lowered the rifle. Her hands began to shake then, the reality of what she'd done crashing over her like a wave. She'd shot a man. She'd threatened to kill. Clara, Dakota's voice, rough but gentle, broke through her spiraling thoughts. He approached slowly, as if she were a spooked horse. "Clara, look at me." She turned to face him, saw the blood on his shirt, the swelling bruise on his jaw, the cuts marking his arms. "You're hurt," she said, her voice breaking. I should have shot sooner. I should have." "You saved my life," Dakota said simply. He cupped her face with his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You kept your promise to face this together, and you saved my life." "I was so scared," Clara admitted, the rifle slipping from her nerveless fingers. "When I saw his knife, when I thought he might—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the terror that had seized her at the thought of losing him. "I know," Dakota murmured. He pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her, with a tenderness that belied his warrior's strength. "I know, little one, but it's over now. You're safe. We're both safe." Clara buried her face in his shirt, not caring about the blood or sweat or dust. She breathed in the scent of him, sage and leather and something uniquely Dakota, and felt the hammering of his heart against her cheek. Alive. He was alive. "I can't lose you," she whispered into his chest. "I know I don't have the right to say that. I know we haven't, that this isn't, but I can't. I can't lose you too." Dakota's arms tightened around her. For a long moment he said nothing, just held her as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "When Augustus's knife came toward me, I didn't think about death. I thought about you, about never getting to hear your laugh again, never seeing you master the rifle shooting, never telling you." He paused, drew a shaky breath. "Never telling you that somewhere between teaching you to track deer and listening to you hum your mother's Irish songs while cooking, I fell in love with you." Clara's breath caught. She pulled back enough to look up at him, to see the vulnerability in his dark eyes, the fear that she might reject this gift he was offering. "I know it's too soon," Dakota continued. "I know you need time, that you just escaped one man trying to own you. I'm not trying to—" Clara reached up and pressed her fingers to his lips, silencing him. "Do you remember what I said about the heart having infinite rooms?" Dakota nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Mine has made space for you," Clara said softly. "Not because you saved me, though you did. Not because I'm grateful, though I am. But because you saw me as a person when everyone else saw property. Because you taught me to be strong without making me feel weak. Because when you speak, especially when you speak low into my ear—" She felt heat rise to her cheeks, but didn't look away. "It makes me feel things I've never felt before, safe and dangerous all at once. Like I could be brave enough to love again." "Clara," Dakota breathed her name like a prayer. His thumb traced her cheekbone, her jaw, her lower lip with infinite care. "I don't want to rush you. I don't want you to feel pressured." "Then stop talking," Clara interrupted, "and kiss me." Dakota needed no further invitation. He lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, to pull away. But Clara rose on her toes to meet him halfway, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss was everything Clara had imagined and nothing she could have predicted. Gentle but fierce, tender but consuming. Dakota kissed her like she was precious, like she was the answer to questions he'd been afraid to ask. His hands cradled her face, angled her head to deepen the kiss, and Clara felt the world tilt on its axis. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dakota rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said again, as if he'd been holding the words back for so long they now had to spill out. "I love your strength and your stubbornness. I love the way you hum when you think no one's listening. I love that you saved my life today with steady hands and a clear eye. I love you, Clara Montgomery. And I want, if you're willing, to spend the rest of my days proving it. Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks, but these were different from the ones she'd cried before. These were tears of joy, of relief, of a future she'd never dared imagine. Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything. Yes to love, and yes to staying, and yes to building a life here together. Dakota smiled then, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. And Clara thought she'd never seen anything more beautiful. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. And Clara let herself believe in happy endings, in second chances, in the possibility of home. Over the following weeks, they settled into a new rhythm, one built on partnership rather than obligation. Clara continued to cook and mend, but now Dakota worked beside her, chopping vegetables while she stirred pots, holding fabric taut while she stitched. They tended the horses together, fixed fence posts together, tracked gain together. Every task became an opportunity for casual touches, hands brushing, shoulders bumping, stolen kisses when the work was done. Dakota taught Clara the Apache words for the things around them: Shosh for bear, Gaucher for dog, Shadai for my friend. But his favorite was Shiaj, which meant my little one. Spoken with such tenderness, it made Clara's heart ache. Say something else, Clara would request, snuggled against him by the fire after supper. Anything. And Dakota would murmur in her ear, stories from his childhood, legends of his people, or simply descriptions of the day, his voice a low rumble that sent pleasant shivers down her spine. The sound of your voice gives me chills, she'd whispered that first time, and he'd promised, then I'll speak into your ear. He'd kept that promise every day since. One evening, as autumn painted the cottonwoods gold and crimson, Dakota took Clara's hand and led her to the creek. The water burbled over smooth stones, reflecting the sunset in shades of amber and rose. Among my people, Dakota began, nervous in a way Clara had never seen him. A man who wishes to marry asks the woman's family for permission. But you have no family here, no father to give his blessing. I have you, Clara said softly. You're the only family I need. Dakota's eyes shone with emotion. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a bracelet woven from horsehair and adorned with turquoise beads. I made this for Ayanna, he said quietly. I've carried it since she died, unable to let it go. But last night, I realized she would want me to be happy. She would want me to love again. He met Clara's eyes. I'd like you to have it, not as a replacement for what we both lost, but as a symbol of what we found together. Clara's vision blurred with tears as Dakota tied the bracelet around her wrist, his fingers gentle and sure. Together, she echoed. Clara Montgomery, Dakota said formally, still holding her hand. Will you marry me? Will you build a life here, raise horses and maybe children if we're blessed? Will you be my wife, my partner, my home? Yes, Clara said without hesitation. Yes to all of it. I'll marry you, Dakota. I'll spend every day proving I'm worthy of the man you are. You're not property. You're a person, Dakota said fiercely, pulling her into his arms. And I see a woman worth cherishing, worth protecting, worth loving for all my days. You don't have to prove anything, Shiaj. You already are everything I need. They married a week later, in a small ceremony by the creek. James from the trading post served as witness, along with 2 Apache elders, who traveled from the reservation to bless the union. Clara wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, with wildflowers woven into her hair. Dakota wore traditional Apache wedding attire, a shirt adorned with intricate beadwork, his long hair loose and flowing. The ceremony blended traditions, Apache blessings spoken in the language of Dakota's ancestors, vows exchanged in English that Clara understood. They drank from a wedding vessel, symbolizing the joining of their lives, and Dakota presented Clara with a blanket, wrapping it around both their shoulders to represent their new shared home. As the sun set over the valley, painting everything in gold and shadow, Dakota and Clara stood wrapped in that blanket, surrounded by the few people they'd invited to witness their union. "I love you," Dakota murmured into Clara's ear, his breath warm against her skin, sending those familiar shivers cascading down her spine. "And I love you," Clara replied, turning in his arms to kiss him as his wife for the first time. That night, in the cabin they now shared as husband and wife, Dakota carried Clara over the threshold, tradition from her world that made him smile. He set her down gently in their bedroom, where candles flickered and cast dancing shadows on the walls. "Are you nervous?" Dakota asked, cupping her face tenderly. Clara considered the question honestly. A month ago, the thought of intimacy would have terrified her, associated as it was with threats and ownership. But with Dakota, she felt only anticipation, only trust. "No," she said truthfully. "Not with you. Never with you." Dakota kissed her then, slow and deep, walking her backward until her legs hit the edge of the bed. His hands found the buttons of her dress, working them free with surprising dexterity. "Tell me if anything," he began. "I will," Clara promised. "But I trust you, Dakota, completely." The night unfolded in whispered endearments and gentle discoveries, in the meeting of 2 people who'd found home in each other's arms. Dakota kept his promise to cherish her, to protect her, to love her with every fiber of his being. And Clara gave herself freely, without fear or reservation, to the man who'd taught her what love truly meant. 5 years later, Clara stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Dakota teach their 4-year-old son, Daniel, to ride. The boy, who had his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn determination, whooped with delight as the gentle mare trotted around the corral. Their daughter, 2-year-old Sarah, played at Clara's feet, stacking stones with intense concentration. The ranch had grown. They now ran 50 horses, supplied several settlements with well-trained mounts, and had built a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. Clara had learned to track as well as any scout, could shoot with deadly accuracy, and had earned the respect of both the Apache community and the white settlers who traded with them. But more than the prosperity, more than the success, Clara treasured the life they'd built, one of partnership, respect, and love that had only deepened with time. Dakota still murmured in her ear every night, still made her shiver with the sound of his voice. And Clara still marveled that she'd found this, a man who saw her as an equal, a home that felt safe, a future bright with possibility. As the sun set over their valley, painting the sky in familiar shades of amber and rose, Dakota caught her eye from the corral and smiled, that full, genuine smile she'd fallen in love with. Clara smiled back, one hand resting on her slightly rounded belly where their 3rd child grew, and thought about the scared, desperate woman who'd stumbled into a trading post 5 years ago. That woman had been running from a life she didn't want. This woman had run toward one she'd never dared dream possible. And it had all begun with a simple act of kindness, an emerald ring she'd never had to trade, and a warrior who'd seen not property to claim, but a person worth saving. A woman who would in turn save him right back. Together, they'd built something neither could have created alone. A home, a family, a love that would endure through whatever challenges the frontier threw their way. And that, Clara reflected, as Dakota returned to the porch and pulled her into his arms while their children played nearby, was the greatest adventure of all. The winter wind howled through the valley, carrying with it the promise of a harsh storm. Clara stood at the window, watching dark clouds gather on the horizon with growing concern. Dakota had ridden out 3 hours earlier to check on the northern pasture where a dozen horses grazed, and he should have returned by now. "Mama, when's Papa coming home?" Daniel asked, abandoning his wooden toys to stand beside her. "Soon, sweetheart," Clara said, though worry gnawed at her gut. She knew these mountains, knew how quickly weather could turn deadly. The temperature had already dropped 20 degrees since morning. Sarah tugged on Clara's skirt. "Cold, Mama." Clara scooped up her daughter and moved to build up the fire, but her eyes kept drifting to the window. Another hour passed, then 2. The snow began falling in thick, heavy flakes that quickly obscured the landscape. Clara's worry transformed into genuine fear. "Daniel," she said, forcing calm into her voice, "I need you to be brave. Papa might need help, and I have to go find him. Mrs. Chen from the trading post will come stay with you and Sarah." "I want to come," Daniel protested, his lower lip trembling. Clara knelt before her son, gripping his small shoulders. "I need you here to protect your sister. You're the man of the house until Papa and I return. Can you do that?" Daniel straightened, puffing out his chest. "Yes, Mama." After settling the children with their neighbor, Clara saddled her fastest mare and rode north into the storm. The wind cut through her layers of clothing like knives, and the snow fell so thick she could barely see 10 feet ahead. But Clara had learned tracking from the best. She followed the faint impressions of Dakota's horses' hooves, reading the story they told in the disturbed snow. 2 miles from the ranch, she found his horse standing riderless, reins trailing. Panic seized her chest like a vice, but she forced herself to think clearly. Dakota had taught her that panic killed more people than any predator. She dismounted, examining the ground carefully. Blood, just a few drops, but enough to make her heart race. Boot prints leading west, unsteady, dragging slightly. Clara followed the trail, leading both horses. She found Dakota a 1/4 mile away, sheltered beneath an overhang of rock, his face pale and drawn with pain. His left leg was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. He'd fashioned a rough splint from branches, but blood seeped through his pants where bone had torn through skin. "Clara," he gasped when he saw her, relief and shame warring in his expression. "Horse spooked at a rattlesnake, threw me into rocks. I told you I'd die before I hurt you. Breaking promises already." "Hush," Clara said, fiercely, dropping to her knees beside him. She assessed the injury with the clinical efficiency he'd taught her. Compound fracture, significant blood loss, early signs of shock. "We need to get you home. Can you ride if I help you mount?" "Clara, in this storm—" "We're not debating this," she interrupted, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You came for me when I had nothing. You taught me to be strong. Now let me use that strength. Together, remember?" Despite his pain, Dakota smiled. Together, he echoed weakly. Getting him onto the horse was agony for both of them. Dakota bit back screams as Clara maneuvered his broken leg, and tears froze on her cheeks as she worked. She mounted behind him, one arm wrapped around his waist to hold him steady, the other gripping the reins. The journey home took twice as long as it should have, Clara fighting both the storm and Dakota's increasing delirium from pain and cold. By the time they reached the cabin, Dakota had lost consciousness. Clara half-carried, half-dragged him inside, her own strength nearly spent. Mrs. Chen helped her get him into bed, while the children watched with wide, frightened eyes. "Mama, is Papa going to die?" Daniel whispered. "No," Clara said with absolute conviction, even though terror clawed at her throat. "I won't let him." Over the next 3 days, Clara barely slept. She set Dakota's leg using techniques he'd taught her, cleaning the wound with whiskey that made him scream even in his fevered state. She fought the infection that tried to take hold, changing bandages every few hours, forcing him to drink water and broth when he was lucid enough to swallow. On the 4th night, when the fever finally broke, Dakota woke to find Clara slumped in a chair beside the bed, her hands still holding his, dark circles beneath her eyes, and her face gaunt with exhaustion. "Shiaz," he murmured, and Clara's eyes snapped open immediately. "You're awake," she breathed, pressing her palm to his forehead. "The fever's gone. Thank God. You saved me," Dakota said, wonder in his voice. Again, Clara's composure finally cracked. She buried her face in their joined hands and sobbed, great heaving sobs of relief and released terror. "I thought I might lose you," she choked out. "When I found you in that storm when the fever wouldn't break, I thought, I'm here," Dakota said, pulling her onto the bed beside him, despite the pain it caused. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, Mrs. Whatever my last name actually is." Clara laughed through her tears. "We never did settle that, did it? Am I Clara Montgomery still? Or Clara, what's your full Apache name?" "Dakota Nashoba. It means friend wolf, though Clara Wolf sounds strange in English." "Clara Wolf," she tested, then smiled. "I like it. Fierce. Like me when I'm protecting my family." Dakota cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "The sound of your voice gives me chills," he murmured, echoing her words from years ago. "Then I'll speak into your ear," Clara replied, and proceeded to tell him everything he'd missed while fevered. How Daniel had been brave, how Sarah had drawn pictures for Papa, how the horses were fine, how much she loved him. Dakota's recovery was slow. For weeks, he chafed at his immobility, frustrated by his dependence on Clara and Mrs. Chen. But gradually, he learned to accept help with the grace Clara had once shown, understanding that strength sometimes meant admitting weakness. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers painting the valley in purple and gold. Dakota could finally walk with a cane, his leg healed, but leaving him with a permanent limp. Clara watched him work with the horses, adapting his movements, refusing to let the injury define his limitations. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the children play, Dakota pulled Clara close. "I was proud before," he said quietly. "Too proud to ask for help, to admit vulnerability. But you taught me that accepting help isn't weakness. It's trust. It's love." Clara kissed his jaw. "We teach each other," she said simply. "That's what partners do." The sound of approaching horses made them both tense, old instincts dying hard. But these were friendly riders, James from the trading post, and a woman Clara had never seen before. She was young, perhaps 20, with sun-darkened skin and terrified eyes that Clara recognized all too well. The woman's dress was torn, her arms marked with bruises. "This is Maria," James announced grimly. "Found her walking the desert road. She's running from a husband who beats her. I thought maybe, well, you two know something about fresh starts." Clara and Dakota exchanged a look, entire conversations passing between them in a glance. Then Clara stood, descending the porch steps with her hand extended in welcome. "You're safe here," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "My name is Clara, and this is my husband, Dakota. Come inside, you must be hungry." As Maria followed Clara into the cabin, tears streaming down her face, Dakota watched his wife with a love so profound it bordered on pain. She'd transformed from the terrified woman he'd found in that trading post into someone who could offer the same sanctuary she'd once received. The circle was complete, and now beginning again. Over the following months, Maria became part of their household. Clara taught her to shoot, to track, to defend herself. Dakota taught her to read horses, to recognize danger before it arrived. And slowly, like a flower unfurling in sunlight, Maria began to heal. One afternoon, Clara found Dakota sitting alone by the creek, staring at the water with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What troubles you, husband?" she asked, settling beside him on the bank. "Nothing troubles me," Dakota said slowly. "I was thinking about circles, how life moves in them. I lost Ayana to fire and violence. I thought I'd never heal from that wound. Then you stumbled into my life, and together we built something new. Now Maria comes to us, seeking the same sanctuary we found together. The heart has infinite rooms." Clara quoted her mother's wisdom. "We make space for those who need shelter." "Yes," Dakota agreed. "But I was also thinking about how grateful I am. For that day in the trading post when you tried to trade your ring. For every moment since. For you, Shiaz, who saved me in every way a person can be saved." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the water flow past. "We saved each other," she corrected gently. "And we'll keep doing it, every day, for the rest of our lives." As summer peaked and the valley bloomed with life, a young Apache man began visiting the ranch regularly, ostensibly to trade for horses. But Clara noticed how his eyes followed Maria, how he found excuses to speak with her, how she blushed and smiled in his presence. "His name is Nawel," Dakota explained one evening. "It means jaguar. He's a good man from a respected family. He lost his wife in childbirth 2 years ago." "And he's interested in Maria?" Clara observed. "He's asked my permission to court her properly," Dakota confirmed. "I told him the decision is hers, not mine. But if she's willing, I'd give my blessing." Maria, when approached, was hesitant. "I just escaped one marriage," she said to Clara. "How can I trust another man not to hurt me?" "You can't know for certain," Clara answered honestly. "But you can watch how he treats you when he thinks no one's looking. You can see if he respects your no as much as your yes. You can take your time and let him prove his character." She paused. "Dakota never rushed me. He gave me space to heal, to choose, to become strong enough to love without fear. If Nawel is truly a good man, he'll do the same for you." 6 months later, Clara and Dakota stood witness as Maria married Nawel in a ceremony by the same creek where they'd spoken their own vows. The bride glowed with happiness, her terror replaced by cautious hope, then growing joy. As Nahuel wrapped the wedding blanket around both their shoulders, Clara squeezed Dakota's hand, remembering their own ceremony, the journey that had brought them here. "Another circle complete," Dakota murmured into her ear, and Clara shivered despite the warm summer evening. "And beginning again," she agreed. Years continued to flow like water, bringing changes and challenges. Daniel grew into a young man with his father's strength and his mother's fierce determination. He could track game through terrain that left other hunters baffled, and gentle the wildest horses with patience and respect. Sarah became a skilled healer, learning from both her mother's practical knowledge and the Apache medicine woman who sometimes visited the ranch. The ranch itself grew into something more than just a homestead. It became a sanctuary, a place where those fleeing violence or seeking fresh starts could find shelter and safety. Clara and Dakota asked no questions, demanded no explanations. They simply offered what had once been offered to them: food, rest, and the space to heal. One autumn evening, when Clara was 43 and Dakota 48, they sat together on the porch as they had countless times before. Silver threaded Dakota's long hair now, and laugh lines crinkled the corners of Clara's eyes. Daniel was married with a child of his own. Sarah was courting a young doctor from the settlement. The ranch ran smoothly, prosperity earned through hard work and fair dealing. "Do you ever think about that day in the trading post?" Clara asked, her head resting on Dakota's shoulder. "About how different our lives might have been?" "Every day," Dakota admitted. "I think about the woman who tried to trade her mother's ring for water. About how close I came to riding past, to minding my own business." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes still able to make her heart skip after all these years. "I think about how empty my life would have remained without you in it." "The sound of your voice gives me chills," Clara whispered, the words as true now as they'd been 15 years ago. "Then I'll speak into your ear," Dakota replied, and proceeded to tell her again, as he had every day of their marriage, exactly how much he loved her. As stars emerged overhead and the familiar sounds of the ranch settled into evening, horses nickering in their stalls, the distant call of a coyote, the soft murmur of the creek, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd run from a life of violence and ownership into the arms of a man who'd taught her that love meant freedom, that strength meant accepting help, that home was built with two people choosing each other every single day. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what, Chiage?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For teaching me to be strong without making me feel weak. For showing me that the heart has infinite rooms, and love isn't about replacing what was lost, but honoring it while building something new." Dakota kissed her temple. "Thank you for saving a lonely warrior who'd forgotten how to hope. For bringing light back into darkness. For giving me a family, a home, a reason to greet each dawn with gratitude." They sat in comfortable silence as the moon rose, silvering the valley in pale light. Two people who'd found each other in desperation and built something enduring through trust, respect, and a love that had only deepened with time. The frontier was slowly changing, settlements growing into towns, territories becoming states, the wild spaces shrinking year by year. But here in their valley, Clara and Dakota had created something timeless, a sanctuary where love conquered fear, where strength meant vulnerability, where two broken people had healed each other into wholeness. And every evening, as they had for 15 years and would for however many more they were granted, Dakota would murmur into Clara's ear, his voice sending pleasant shivers down her spine, reminding her that she was loved, cherished, and home. Together, they'd written their own frontier legend, not one of conquest or violence, but of redemption, healing, and a love that had survived every challenge the harsh land could offer. And that story, passed down through generations of their children and grandchildren, would endure long after the last wild spaces were tamed, a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest adventures aren't about conquering new territory, but about finding the courage to love again after loss, to trust again after betrayal, to build a home not in a place, but in another person's heart. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Clara and Dakota's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.